So, today at Wargames Illustrated, we've been joined by Wargaming buddies Jerry.
Hello.
And Pete.
Hi.
And they brought in their game, which is the Battle of Aughrim. Now, this is in connection with the theme of our magazine, which is Revisited. Back in, was it 2018, guys?
Yes, must have been.
Yeah, we featured an article about this game before, when you were just piecing the whole thing together. And today it's come to beautiful fruition as a, what would be, is it a 10-foot table, Jerry? 12-foot table?
12 foot by 6 foot.
12 foot by 6 foot. Okay, so we've had it out and we've photographed it, and the article that you can read in the magazine tells you a bit more about how the guys went about collecting all the figures and getting all the terrain together. But just tell us a bit more about where are we in history with this game?
I'll let Pete answer that.
So this is 1690, the Williamite Jacobite conflict in Ireland, which obviously began when James was ousted from the throne, went to Ireland in order to raise an army to try and get the English throne back, and William of Orange had come over and taken the English throne and had now come over to Ireland to defeat James and to secure the throne. So the first battle was Battle of the Boyne, 1690, and then this Aughrim the following year. And then both battles the Jacobites lost, and ultimately James lost the throne. So that's where we are with the history bit.
The history bit, right, okay. So where are we with the gaming bit? Because interestingly, you sort of went about it in reverse, didn't you, really? Tell us a bit about that, Jerry. You I mean, 10 mil are the figures that we've got on the table, but that wasn't really your intention to start with, was it?
No, I'd seen a game put on in 28 mil, and I'm wargaming in 28 mil myself. But for a battle of this size, a lot of the things just didn't gel with ranges and how people were moving, etc. So I thought reverse engineer it. So let's have a look at the size, the width and depth of the battlefield. Let's look at the average frontage of units, and let's actually use that to decide. Because ultimately the battlefield can only be 6 foot wide, because my arms aren't much longer, and once you start bringing that in, understanding what that width will then be from that then brings you down to what your frontages for an average infantry battalion should be, and then we looked at cavalry squadrons and artillery, which is probably the most contentious piece, in that we've gone for very big bases. We use black powder. And we tinkered with pike and shot, but black powder is where we're stuck now, because the interesting thing with this period is we're on that cusp of the pike being replaced by the bayonet, and so that's how we've come to this generic base size for the infantry, and then everything else is based on a percentage of that. So we know what the average battery frontage was, and we sort of built it around that, and then almost the size of the number of figures on it is almost immaterial, but we went for 10 mil because that was the look we were looking for, because we wanted the scope and the scale of it. Going to sort of 6 mil was probably a little bit too small, and 15-20 mil would have made our units look very small on these size bases, so this to us was the ideal compromise.
I think as well, sorry, just to come in on that, the size of the battle, it was important. It was important that you reflected the whole, because the flanks were the problem, and at both the Boyne and at Aughrim, the Jacobites couldn't get the reserves to the flank. They had to make a decision about where they were going to send their reserves, and once committed, they couldn't get them back again. And in 28 mil, that just wasn't working, because the size of the table, and even on a 10-foot table, Jacobite cavalry could get from one end to the other in 2 turns. And so therefore you're not reflecting the same problems that the commanders had. So that's why we so felt it was important to have the size of the battlefield being the 2 miles, 3 miles, whatever it was, which is why then we had to bring everything down to make sure that we reflected it properly. So
so as you're not natural 10 mil, 12 mil, anything other than 28 mil gamers, really, what what other things did you find by dropping down to that scale? I mean, were you immediately thinking, oh, these are just going to look like tokens, and were you ultimately impressed by what you ended up with? Or
Well, I think I said to you before, I was hugely sceptical about 10 mil. When Jerry suggested it, he said, let's do it in 10 mil. And I thought, I'd seen micro scale games before, and I just thought they don't look good. To my eye, they just look like playing pieces. And I did worry that was going to be the case. But I have to say, once we based them and painted up the first few, I think they look amazing, and they're also able to reflect on the base how the unit would have actually looked. So the Danish and Dutch units that fought in 2 ranks that had platoon fire were able to show them in 2 ranks. The French in 4 ranks were able to show them as well. So you can actually reflect on the base how the things would have looked. And because we're basing everything on one base, you can't get them mixed up. Because that's the other thing with 28 mil and different base sizes. That once the game starts, everything gets muddled up, and the flags end up at the end of the line and all the rest of it. This you keep in the constant formation all the time.
And it's the level of command as well. And I'll just show you what we do as well. Is each unit has the stats and who he belongs to underneath, which is then reflected to each divisional commander gets his sheet as well. But it's the command piece in that in 28 mil people start treating them as individual soldiers. So what you tend to find, and again the bugbear with artillery, is you get a single gun which is looking around the corner of a building when actually a battery frontage is 80 metres and probably as deep if not deeper behind, and it takes up a lot of space on the battlefield. And by building in that level of size on it, it starts to reflect that, and so it becomes quite quick. So a brigade of move is literally 4 pieces that you're going to move, and it can be done very, very quickly. So actually, even though it's a 5 division aside game, it plays very, very quickly because of that. Packing up is perhaps a little longer, but we'll see how quickly we can do it later.
It plays a lot quicker than 28 mil games as well, for exactly that reason, because a 28 mil battalion would be 5 or 6 bases, and then across, so that's 18 bases across a brigade. So you're making 18 individual moves, whereas here you move a brigade in 3 by 3 bases, and I still think they look great. People will be able to see in the photos. But I don't think you lose any of the visual impact, because initially we saw the League of Augsburg and various other people's 28 mil games for this period, and they do look stunning. The figures look tremendous, especially the flags, giant flags. But I think the visual aspect of this, being able to show the full line of the defence, looks just as good.
Barry Hilton's brought out a number of outstanding guides to the Boyne, to the Siege of Derry / Londonderry, and he's done the first part of Aughrim, which is the Williamite forces, and I think he's bringing out the Jacobites imminently, which possibly means we're going to have to reflag, repaint, but we'll cross that bridge when Barry surprises us all with his next masterpiece.
Yeah, and you've also visited the battlefield itself as well fairly recently. What did you discover from that visit?
It's really unchanged. It's right out on the west coast, so there is very little that has changed with it. You've obviously got some modern drainage, which is, the areas of the bog are a lot firmer than they were. There's been a lot of planting of trees. We found a picture from 1942 of the area, and there's just some hedges and very little trees there. So again, some of the views are blocked, but we went to the various sort of sites. So the first one really is the right flank of the Williamites. Went to the causeway. Although there's a new road in, the old road is still there. The bridge is there. There's a new church, and the village is slightly expanded, but not by much. The ruins of the castle are there. And again, when you actually go and stand on the ground, you actually start to have a look at the field of view that the commanders have at various levels. And certainly for that flank, you're looking at Bork's battalion in the castle holding that bridge, supported by dragoons behind, and then Sarsfield and his cavalry brigade behind. And there's a lot of controversy of how that position was taken. and treason, treachery, wrong ammunition, etc. But about actually going there and seeing the ranges and seeing how the land is, it's really useful, because although we can't necessarily portray that on the table, what it does allow you to say is, well, perhaps Bloody Hollow, for instance, when you actually walk around that, you can see, actually, I can do overhead firing. I can actually have 2 battalions almost behind each other because of how the land is, which means I can double my firepower in. So you start to get an understanding of how the Huguenot battalions suffered so many casualties. So yeah,
I think for me, the commanders' positions, when you look at both the Boyne and Aughrim battlefields, the positions chosen by the commanders-in-chief seem to be really far back, especially at the Boyne and at Aughrim as well. When you look at it on the map, you think, well, how could he ever see anything from here? Because he seems to be so far away from the actual battle. But when you stand on those positions, you can suddenly see the vista, the view that they've got from those hilltop positions. So again, that drove some special rules that we put into this game about if the CNC if you can draw a visual line to the CNC, you can benefit from their command. But if he comes off the hill and goes down into the battle, nobody can see him. The battle then zooms in and you lose that command and control. So yeah, it was really worth. I'd recommend to anybody, go and have a walk around the battle, your favourite battlefield.
Or ride on Pete's shoulders to be on a horse.
Just be careful.
Oh, that's what you did. You got on his shoulders. Right,
so just be careful.
I said, what's another few feet going to give me view-wise? He was very unkeen.
Yeah. And yes, just be careful when you are walking the battlefield. You don't go into fields with bulls in them.
Yes.
That's another potential hazard, is it? Right. Right. Well, thanks very much for bringing the game in, lads. It does look fantastic, and hopefully, as well as in the page of Wargames Illustrated, you're hopefully taking it on tour, aren't you? Just a couple of shows around the UK, hopefully.
That's the plan. It's just going to be trying to get it booked in and make sure people got room for it, because it is a big footprint. So we'll see. But yeah, and then anybody, if you see us at any of the shows, come and have a chat, and we'll talk you through it.
Yeah. That's great. Thanks very much, fellas. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you.
This video has been brought to you by WiPrime, Wargames Illustrated magazine's online members club. View more videos or find out more about WiPrime by following these links.